Hey, yo, it's Megamouth, and today in the news, we have a story about Nintendo stock price. Nintendo's recently been going through a lot of bad times, and in fact, a lot of technology companies have. With the RAM crisis, with the solid state memory drive crisis that's happening all across the world right now, prices for these, well, in a way, we could call them, I guess, raw materials, the critical technology, the internal organs of computers and video game systems. They have been doubling, quadrupling in price for certain kits of RAM, especially lately. And that is really starting to hurt a lot of these technology companies. Not so much in the here and now, because a lot of these companies do have contracts that they make in advance. So they haven't been hurt quite yet, but they likely will be, in a couple of quarters. So for now, they're likely okay in terms of their finances. But Nintendo is very likely going to have to increase the price of the Nintendo Switch 2 up from $450 to $500. Most people are theorizing that. It could even get worse, where it could go up to like 550 or more. It'll probably affect the Sony PlayStation 5 as well. And of course, the Xbox is not really even a system anymore. I'm sure the fans are real sad about that. But in terms of Nintendo, their stock price is already feeling it because the Switch 2, a lot of people are saying that, oh, it had great early sales and then the holiday sales that kind of collapsed, at least in comparison to what they thought they would be. The Switch 2 was unfortunately way behind the PlayStation 5 sales, at least in North America and Europe. It was still winning pretty big in Japan. But ultimately, in terms of the stock price for Nintendo, which is generally looked at as being the overall, financial health of a company, how well it's doing, it's kind of more like a barometer, I guess would be the proper terminology. Nintendo stock price, it used to be up about 15,000 yen. In just a few months, it's collapsed down below 10,000 yen. It's about a 33% collapse. Um, People are really starting to get to the point where they're starting to see the future. They're starting to see the writing on the wall. And for any company that makes, technology that makes hardware for consumers to purchase, it's going to be a bad 1 to 3 years, most people anticipate. And, the good times are essentially over. Like, if you go back and you look at Nintendo's stock price, if you look all the way back at its history, we have data going all the way back to 1998. Used to be about, and I guess this is converted to American dollars, about $2.55. Then back in the, well, second golden age for Nintendo, really. I guess the first one was the NES and Super NES era in the late 80s, early 90s. And then we had the Nintendo Wii era, a hugely successful system for Nintendo back in the day. The stock price, pretty much when it released, it was about $3.50. At the height of the Wii craze, it was about $15, about 15 and a half. And then, of course, the fad kind of faded. The Wii U era came in. Nintendo kind of cratered. It went way back down there, almost to its like 1998 price level. And then, thankfully, they survived. They endured. The Nintendo Switch came out in 2017, and it's pretty much been onwards and upwards from there. Went from about $6 up to about well, that'd be about 24, almost 25. It almost clipped 25 here recently with the launch of the Switch 2. So the initial sales for the Switch 2 were wonderful. They said it was one of the fastest selling video game systems of all time. It was actually outpacing the Switch 1's initial sales during that same time period upon release. But since then, with everything going on in the world, with the RAM and solid state memory drive crisis, uh, man, the stock price, it really has gone down by about a third. It will likely continue to collapse. And if we look at a smaller view, here in just like they hit their high back in August, and in the span of just about 6 months, it's gone down by about a third. And that is just devastating for any company that's publicly traded on the stock market. Luckily, there are some bright spots. When you look at the Japanese sales, there are some headlines going around right now where the Switch 2 has already outsold the Nintendo GameCube, which was Nintendo's home console that was out from about 2001 to about 2006. And so the Switch 2 in about 5 months has already outsold the Nintendo GameCube's lifetime sales in Japan over 5 years. So that is really impressive. When you look at statistics, some things are, well, there's some good things, and they call what's the old saying that the statistics there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. But sometimes statistics can also be kind of mathematical as well, and they can, well, I know people are kind of really being down on Nintendo right now, but there are some bright spots. Like right now, the Switch 2, it sold about 313,000 units in Japan last week. well outpacing the Switch Lite, the Switch OLED model, the original Switch model, well above the that 10 to 1 honestly over the PlayStation 5 digital model with the original and Pro models included. So Nintendo is at least doing very well still in Japan. I guess when you add all those together, it's what about 8 to 1 or 10 to 1 in terms of total sales for all the various variations for both the Switch 2 and the PlayStation models that are being sold right now. Xbox continues to do admirably with 29 total units sold in Japan last week. 29 in the entire country. Microsoft, you should be embarrassed. If I was your parent, Microsoft, I would disown you. But in terms of lifetime sales, I believe we had some good numbers over here. Like software sales continue to be good. Mario Kart World sold another 92,000 units last week. Mario Kart World is not my favorite video game of all time, not my favorite in the Mario Kart series, but I'm more of a classical Mario Kart 64 guy myself. But some others have been pretty good throughout the years, like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, I would say on the Switch 2. It was a pretty good one overall. Some other games, some Nintendo Switch 1 games continue to sell really well. There's actually quite a few Switch 2 releases in the top 10 in Japan right now. Three, four, five, six. Yeah, 60% of the top 10 is Nintendo Switch 2 related software. And let's see, three. Yeah, it looks like Nintendo completely dominated all the top 10. Sony, what are you doing? You got completely knocked out of the top 10. So, in terms of software sales, in terms of hardware, at least in their home country, Nintendo's still doing wonderfully. In terms of the overall hardware sales, well, I guess this is just more data, at least in terms of the weekly data. Same thing we looked at on the other web page. But for the Switch 2, for its overall lifetime sales, it is about 4.1 million right now. Uh, in terms of the Sony PlayStation 5 sales, it is about 7 million in its entire life. That video game system released back in November of 2020. So, it feels like just the other day, but already that's about, 5, 6 years ago. And in just about 6 or so months, the Nintendo Switch 2 has already sold about 60% of the PlayStation 5's lifetime sales in Japan. So I think the Switch 2 is probably going to overtake the PlayStation 5's lifetime sales within the next year. And it should be onwards and upwards from there because, Japan, they love Nintendo, they love small handheld video game systems. So, at least in that territory, I think Nintendo will still be doing very well for a long time to come. But there are certainly worrying signs. Nintendo sales greatly disappointed in North America and in Europe and those territories this year, the other big three territories in the world for video game system sales. Uh, sorry, choked up there. It was about 2 to 1 based on the sales data I saw in North America, the PlayStation 5 in comparison to the Switch 2 this holiday season. That was very unexpected, shocking for Nintendo fans. A little bit disappointing to see that. And in Europe, I know it's never been Nintendo's strongest territory at any point in their history, but it was about 4 to 1 PlayStation versus Nintendo Switch 2 sales in Europe during this last holiday season. So Nintendo's only doing well in about 1/3 of the world right now. And with these RAM prices likely to cause increased hardware prices over the coming year, that will likely decrease sales further. So Nintendo is having a little bit of trouble right now. Is this disastrous? Is it like a Wii U level failure? No, certainly not. But, because Wii U only sold like 13 million worldwide in its entire life. So when you add global sales together, the Nintendo Switch 2 in just a few months has already outsold the lifetime sales for the Wii U. But right now, does anyone expect that the Nintendo Switch 2 would outsell the Nintendo Switch 1's lifetime sales of about 160 million units? No, I'd have to say no. So if you're an investor and you can look realistically at where sales are headed, if the successor to the Switch 1 is almost certainly going to sell significantly less, why would you invest at these inflated stock prices right now when stock price usually is tied to revenues and profits? If you see the future, if you see those trending down, why would you invest? Why would you not go ahead and sell now if you already own stock? And so I think that's why we're seeing the stock go down so quickly. There's a lot of smart people out there that I guess can see the writing on the wall, and they're trying to get out now while they can. Now, will Nintendo go out of business? Certainly not. It's reported they have $10 billion in overall savings, so they could weather a significant financial storm. They could, weather some significantly difficult years coming up because the RAM crisis is expected. A lot of people say it will take 2 to 3 years to overcome this. So it's probably not going to be as much fun in the Switch 2 generation as it was in the Switch 1 generation. There probably won't be even as many video games coming out if people have to reallocate the resources at the corporate level. But ultimately, I would say it's a mixed bag. Nintendo is still going to be okay overall. I do believe there will be a Switch 3 in the future, but things are certainly not going now, at least in terms of their stock price. So anyway, this is the news for today. This is Mega Mouse signing out. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.